Hello gamers, start your engines and get ready to drive all shiny and chrome through the gates of Valhalla. I'm Steve Tassie, the board game guy, here with part 2 of my Thunder Road Vendetta tutorial. In part 1, I covered the basic gameplay rules, so if you haven't watched that yet and you don't know how the core game works, go away and watch that video. We'll wait for you. In part 2, we're going to learn all about the expansion content available for Vendetta. I got the Maximum Chrome edition of the game, so I'll be using all that stuff to teach you. But I can't guarantee that what I've got will match the retail expansion material 100%. Some of what I'm showing you may be Kickstarter exclusives. We're going to look at the Big Rig and the Final Five, Carnage at Devil's Run, Chop Shop, and the mini expansions found in Extra Ammo and German Engineering. Big Rig and the Final Five introduces 2 new teams to play and the ability to play with 5 players. This expansion includes the Big Rig 3-piece figure, the red dashboard, the red chopper, 4 red dice, minor damage tokens, off-road tiles, as well as the 5 motorcycles and their dashboards, the yellow chopper, and 6 yellow dice that make up the Final Five biker gang. If a player wants to play as the Big Rig or the Final Five, they take the dashboards, dice, and figures of their chosen team instead of one of the standard 4 teams. We'll cover the Big Rig rules first. Unlike the standard dashboards, the Big Rig's cab dashboard has one unique command on it: hydraulic steering. And then it has a 3-piece dash that has a repair command on each of the 3 segments, plus 2 other command spaces in each segment. Just like with the standard team at the start of the round, you will roll your 4 dice. On the first turn of the round, you will assign one of your dice to the hydraulic steering space. Whatever number the die starts at is the maximum number of lane changes your rig will be able to make this round. So high is good. Every time you choose to change lanes this round, you will turn the hydraulic steering die down 1 number. Remove the die entirely if you change lanes while it's showing a 1. If the die is gone and you want to change lanes, you can't. Suck it up. Every turn of the round, you will assign 1 die to one of the 9 available command spots on your dashboard. The number on the die is how far the rig will move that turn, and the command is what you're going to do after you move, or in some cases, before you move. Just like with the regular car dashboards, some command spots on the Big Rig can be activated by any die, and some require a specific value to activate. Even though there are 9 different spots to choose from, you cannot assign more than 1 die to each segment of the dashboard in any given round. So if on one turn you activate the rocket launcher on the front segment, you cannot activate the cow catcher on the front segment or the front segment's repair action later on in this round. Once you've assigned your die for the turn, you will activate the command and then you will move. Or depending on the command, you might resolve the command first and then move. The amount that you move is equal to the value of the die that was placed on the rig this turn. The Big Rig never coasts. Let's look at each of the commands you can use. Repair. Each of the 3 sections has a repair command that requires a 3 to use. The effect of using a segment's repair command is to remove 1 damage token from a system in that same segment of the Big Rig. The front section of the Big Rig has a rocket launcher and a cow catcher. Rocket launcher. The front section has a big-ass rocket launcher that fires a missile. This missile hits the space 2 spots in front of the Big Rig, and every road vehicle in or adjacent to that spot takes a minor damage token. Cow catcher. The first time you would move into a road vehicle or a wreck this turn, the controller of that vehicle will move it 1 space to the left or the right, their choice. If you're running into a wreck, you decide whether it moves left or right. The middle segment of the Big Rig has traction drive and airstrike capabilities. Airstrike works like any other player's airstrike command does. The traction drive lets you use the road die value and add it to your movement points. You are not restricted to driving solely on pavement in order to use this option. You can use it no matter where you're driving. In the rear segment of the rig, you have your hazard dispenser and your targeting computer. The targeting computer allows you to re-roll the shooting die when you make your shooting attack this turn. The hazard dispenser allows you to place a random hazard token face down in one of the spaces in the big rig's rear arc. The space must be empty in order to receive a hazard token. In addition to the various systems that the big rig has for you to activate in a round, there are some qualities that the big rig has due to its immense size, and those qualities have rules associated with them. These rules supersede any regular rules that they may contradict from the rulebook. Massive. The big rig is 3 pieces long, but the only space that matters is the space where the front of the rig is. If the cab drives onto a muddy space, you pay 2 extra movement points for moving there, but you don't have to pay that again for each time the other segments move onto that same muddy space. Sturdy. Any game effect that would cause the rig to move or stop just doesn't. Instead, the rig takes a minor damage to the system of its controller's choice. The space on the board that would have altered the big rig's move, say an oil slick or toxic goo, is replaced by an off-road token instead. The big rig has just torn right through that spot and opened up a clear path. Dependable. The big rig is an irresistible force, and when that force meets an immovable object in the form of an impassable space, the big rig wins the conflict. The impassable space gets an off-road token placed over it, and the big rig suffers a minor damage to the system of the controller's choice. Solid. If any section of the big rig ends up underneath a chopper, the rig is not eliminated. Instead, the rig suffers a minor damage token to the system of its controller's choice, and the chopper is returned to its controlling player. Slamming with or against the big rig works a little differently as well. Anytime the rig is involved in a slam, only roll the direction die, not the slam die. The other vehicle in the slam is always the one that moves. If the big rig hits you, you move. If you hit the big rig, you bounce off it. Shooting from the big rig. Unlike the smaller vehicles, the big rig has 2 firing arcs, one at the front, like everyone else does, and one at the rear. When you make a shooting attack, you may choose to shoot forward or backward, but not both in the same turn. If you activated your rocket launcher this turn, that is completely separate from your regular shooting attack. Shooting at the big rig. Each of the 3 segments of the big rig is treated as a separate large vehicle for shooting at it. If a player has one or more big rig segments in its firing arc after the car finishes moving, they pick one system in a segment that they can target and roll the shoot die. You cannot target any of the big rig's repair systems. It's only the other cool toys. If you roll large or any on the shoot die, you have damaged that system. If any other situation causes the big rig to be damaged, then it is the rig's controller that chooses which of its undamaged systems gets a minor damage token. Only when a player directly shoots it are they the one who chooses what's being damaged. Eliminating the big rig. There are only 2 ways that the big rig can be eliminated from the game. Number 1, if it ever has 6 minor damage tokens on it simultaneously, it's eliminated. Number 2, if the entire big rig is on the rear board when that board gets cleared to make room for a new front board. If any portion of the big rig is on the middle board when the rear board is cleared, the big rig stays in play, with the portions that were on the rear board just dangling behind until it's time for the big rig to move forward again. Big rig expansion compatibility. The big rig cannot be used with the Chop Shop expansion. Other players playing against the big rig can have leaders and weapon upgrades that come from Chop Shop, but the player using the big rig cannot. The big rig is similarly unable to use the German engineering or the bonus commands mini expansion, but people playing against the rig are allowed to use them. If you're using Carnage at Devil's Run, then the big rig is never able to catch fire. Anytime the rig would catch fire, if it had been an ordinary vehicle, instead it takes a minor damage token. And that's all you need to know about the big rig. Now we're going to meet the final five. Just like the big rig, the final five is an alternative team that you can choose instead of a regular team. It also lets you play with up to 5 players. Both the big rig and the final five can be used in the same game, but it is not recommended that you use all 4 regular teams as well as both the big rig and the final five to play a 6-player game. That's just not really going to work. The road will be way too crowded. To play as the final five, take the 6 yellow dice, the yellow chopper, the 5 motorcycles, and all of the yellow dashboards. You will also need the minor damage tokens that are used by both big rig and the final five. Like in the big rig, the player using the final five cannot use the chop shop or German engineering expansions, but can play against people who do. If you're using Carnage at Devil's Run, note that motorcycles never draw an on-fire damage token from the damage token stack, but they can catch fire from terrain elements or other game effects. Unlike the regular Cars command boards, the Final Five command board only has 3 different commands on it. It lacks the drift command because motorcycles can automatically drift past other vehicles on the road. A motorcycle can choose to slam a road vehicle, and if it ends its movement on the same space as a road vehicle, it must slam that car. When a motorcycle is involved in a slam, either as the slammer or the slammee, you only roll the direction die and the motorcycle moves in that direction. If 2 of your bikes slam into each other, you decide which one moves, using the final five. At the start of a round, you will roll all 6 dice. On your turn, you will issue movement dice to 2 of your bikes. On one turn per round, instead of moving 2 cycles, you may instead issue 1 movement die to a bike that hasn't moved yet and use a command die to use an airstrike, nitro, or repair command. Unlike cars who can coast a maximum of twice per round, a cycle can coast up to 4 times per round. Moving and shooting. If you assigned movement dice to 2 cycles, move one of them and then use its shoot attack if it's in position to do so, and then move the second bike and use its shoot attack, damaging cycles. Anytime a cycle is damaged, instead of drawing a standard damage token, you take a minor damage token, put it on that bike, and that bike is immediately inoperable. Flip over its dashboard and turn it around so it's facing backwards on the road. And that is all you need in order to play with the Final Five. Next up, we'll take a look at German engineering. This expansion gives players a way to have a little more control over their movement and command use. Anyone using a standard team of cars doesn't use their regular dice and instead takes the corresponding German engineering deck and shuffles them. At the start of the first round, everyone who's using German engineering draws 5 cards, and the player with the lowest total value of cards is going to be our first player. If there's a tie for that, everyone discards their hand, shuffles them back into their deck, draws 5 new cards. Repeat that until someone is the lowest. They get the road die, and they are the start player. Your hand of cards is used in place of dice. On your turn, you play a card onto one of your dashboards, just as you would have placed a die. On one of your turns each round, you can play a card to activate a command. The card value must match the command space that you're using, just like a die would have had to. After you've finished moving a car on your turn, flip the card that you played face down to indicate that car has moved this round. When the round is over, discard all your used cards and draw from your deck until you've got 5 cards in your hand again. If your deck is ever empty, shuffle what is currently in the discard pile and make a new draw pile. Shooting with German engineering. Whenever you make a shooting attack, instead of rolling the shooting die, instead you reveal the top card of your deck and compare it to the size of your target. So that's it for the Germans. So now it's on to extra ammo. This is actually 5 mini expansions all in one. Each expansion is a deck of its own cards, and you can choose to use them one at a time, or you can mix and match. You could use all of them if you want to. If you're using road conditions, shuffle them up during setup and deal 1 card to the middle road of the board and 1 card to the front road. You do not put one on the rear road. Every time you clear the rear board and add a new one, you're going to reveal a new road condition card for that new board. If you need to reveal a new road condition for the front board, but all of the cards have been discarded, then shuffle the discards and make a new stack to draw from. The road condition cards all say what they do on them and are pretty self-explanatory. So here they all are to take a look at. Pause the video for as long as you need to read them if you don't happen to have your deck in front of you right now. In fact, all of the mini expansion cards are pretty self-explanatory, so I'll show you each set of cards when I begin talking about them. Advanced Airstrike cards. To use the Advanced Airstrike cards, shuffle the deck and deal 1 to each player during setup. Unused ones are put back in the box. They are one-use effects to spice up your chopper attacks. They tell you on them when you can use them and what they do. Each player will only have 1 Advanced Airstrike card per game. Bounties. Bounties are achievements to unlock during play for special bonuses. Shuffle the bounties at the start of play and deal 1 to each player. Unused ones are put back in the box. If you achieve your bounty at some point during one of your turns, reveal it and resolve the bonus effect that it gives you. Then discard the card. Each player will only have 1 bounty during the game. The One Shots mini expansion is a set of one-use cards to give your crew a bonus effect. Shuffle them at setup and deal 1 to each player. Unused ones are put back in the box. The cards tell you on them when you can use them and what they do. Discard your One Shots card when used. Read your cards. Each player will only have 1 one-shot card per game. The Bonus Commands expansion cannot be used by someone playing the Big Rig. Shuffle the Bonus Commands during setup and deal 1 to each player who isn't driving the Big Rig. Put the unused ones back in the box. Place your bonus command card face up next to your command board. It gives you an extra command option that you have for the entire game. It will tell you on the card what type of die you need to activate it and just what it does when you do activate it. That's it for the mini expansions. Just 2 more things to cover: Chop Shop and Carnage at Devil's Run. Chop Shop adds 2 main elements to the game: crew leaders and upgrade cards. As mentioned earlier, the Big Rig and the Final 5 expansions cannot use Chop Shop elements themselves, but can race against players who are using them. You can use both elements of Chop Shop in your game, or just use either one of them. To use the upgrades, you will grab the Chop Shop hazard tiles. Those are the ones with the wrench icon on the back, and you'll set them aside for use during play. Then you will shuffle the deck of upgrade cards and deal 4 to each player. You're now going to draft upgrade cards until everyone has 3 of them. To draft the cards, everyone picks 1 from their hand of 4 that they want to keep. They put it face down in front of themselves, and then everyone passes the remaining cards in their hand 1 player to the left. Everybody picks 1 of these 3 cards and passes the remaining 2 cards 1 player to the left. And then everyone picks 1 of the 2 cards that they've just been passed to keep and 1 to discard. The discarded upgrades and all the ones that didn't get dealt out go back in the box. There are 27 different upgrade cards, so I'm not going to detail each and every one of them now. Read your upgrades. They do what they say. 2 of them, the oil dispenser and the mine dispenser, can only be used 3 times each per game. The big red button can only be used once per game. Once each player has drafted their 3 upgrades, everyone reveals their selections and assigns 1 card to each of their cars. Place the upgrade card in the slot above that car's dashboard. That upgrade applies only to the card that it is attached to, and if that card is ever inoperable, the upgrade is not working until the car is working again. To use the crew leaders, take the command tokens and make a supply of them next to the board. Then take all the leader boards, shuffle them up, and deal 2 to each player. Each player will then pick from the 2 that they've been given, 1 to keep and 1 to throw away. The one they don't pick goes back in the box. Each player with a crew leader will place their leaderboard instead of their usual command board. The leaderboard has 4 command spaces on it. Most of the leaders have the standard 4 commands: drift, repair, airstrike, and nitro, but some leaders have new commands, or they have versions of the standard commands that require a different value die or require a command token to activate instead of a die. For example, Asha, the Road Mistress, repairs on a 1 instead of a 6, nitros with 2 to 3s, drifts with a 3 or 4, and calls in an airstrike with a 5 or a 6 instead of with any die. And Chris Crass, the fastest of the fast, needs to use a command token to repair, has standard rules for airstrike, but can nitro with a 1 to 4, and has the special command Need for Speed, which can be used to turn all unassigned dice in that player's pool to the value of the die that has been used to activate the Need for Speed, which must be either a 4 or a 5. The leaderboard will tell you how many command tokens you start the game with. Command tokens must be used to activate certain commands, but you can use a command token in place of a die to activate a command that requires a die. If the die can be a range of values, consider the token you're using to be the lowest possible value for that command. In addition to the standard rules of 1 turn out of the round, you may place a command die on your lead dashboard. Each turn, you may play a command token onto a command space that hasn't yet been used this round. This means that on each turn of the round, you can assign 1 movement die to a car and assign 1 token to a command. And on 1 turn of the round, you can assign 1 move die, 1 command die, and 1 command token. If you use a command token, you will activate the command at the same time that you would activate a command triggered by a die. Depending on the command you're activating, it can happen before movement or after it. At the end of the round, your spent command tokens are returned to the supply, not your hand. So each command token is 1 use only. Each leader also has a special ability that is free to use, although some of them are very situational. Emberko's ability is only relevant in a game with Carnage at Devil's Run content because his ability and one of his commands relate to the fire rules found in that expansion. And that brings us to Carnage at Devil's Run. Carnage at Devil's Run adds a bunch of new boards. It has new hazard types, fire effects, and ongoing damage effects that last until you repair the damage to your car. To get the game set up with Carnage, you will need to do the following. After placing road number 1 on the table as the rear board, shuffle the new boards in with the original ones. Mix the on fire and ongoing effect damage tokens into the pile of standard damage tokens. Mix all 22 of the new hazard tokens in with the standard ones. Shuffle the deck of ongoing effect cards and set them next to the board for use during play. Add the fire die to the supply of effects dice and put a supply of on fire tokens next to the board for use. Let's talk fire. There are several things in Carnage that can cause a car to catch fire. There are fire spaces on some of the boards, there are fire hazards, there's Emberko's flamethrower command ability, and there are on-fire damage tokens in the damage token pile. Anytime a road vehicle catches fire, you take a fire token and place it on the dashboard of that vehicle. Before a flaming vehicle is allowed to move on the turn in which you assign it a die, you will roll the fire die. There are 3 possible outcomes. The smoke side of the die means that the fire has gone out. The flaming skull side of the die means that the car explodes and is immediately eliminated from the game. And then there are the +1 and +2 sides. If you roll that, the flaming vehicle stays on fire, but adds the amount rolled to its movement for the turn. Now that you know how fire works, we'll explore the new terrain and hazard types. The new boards will have all the standard terrain types from the base boards: paved road, off-road, mud, and impassable obstacles. But now we add desert glass, fire, toxic goo, ramps, and salt flats. The new hazard types are quakes, sandworms, desert glass, ramps, fire, and pit traps. When a road vehicle that isn't the big rig enters toxic goo, the vehicle stops moving and loses any more movement points that it had remaining. Remember, if anything would make the big rig stop or move extra spaces, it takes a minor damage and replaces that terrain or hazard with an off-road tile instead. When a non-big rig vehicle enters a desert glass space, it immediately moves one space in the direction it was moving. This extra move doesn't cost any movement points. If a road vehicle enters salt flats during its turn, it becomes eligible to use the road die regardless of whether or not it has driven on paved road this turn. If a non-big rig road vehicle enters a fire space, place an on-fire token on the vehicle's dashboard as per the fire rules that I already explained. Ramps make non-big rig road vehicles airborne if they hit it from directly behind. Roll the stunt die and move that many spaces straight forward. However, if a vehicle enters a ramp space from any other direction for any other reason, it is treated as an impassable obstacle and the vehicle is eliminated from the game. If a hazard tile is revealed and it is a fire, ramp, or desert glass, that space becomes that terrain type and follows the above rules. However, the hazard might be a quake, a sandworm, or a pit trap, and here's how they work. Quakes. When a quake tile is revealed for the first time, remove the tile and then roll the direction die. All non-big rig road vehicles simultaneously move one space in that direction. If this bounces a vehicle onto an impassable obstacle or under a chopper or off the board, that vehicle is immediately eliminated. If the quake bounces any vehicles onto hazard spaces, resolve those hazards one at a time, starting with the one closest to the front edge of the lead board. Sandworm. Shai Hulud shows up and eats the vehicle or vehicles at the rearmost point of the road. If the big rig is at the back of the pack, the sandworm does not eat it, but it does minor damage to the rig. If more than one vehicle is tied for rearmost position, it will eat all of the vehicles that are at the back. Pit traps. When a road vehicle enters a pit trap space, roll the shooting die. If a vehicle stops on a hazard tile and reveals a pit trap, that pit trap immediately becomes an impassable space and that vehicle is eliminated. However, if a vehicle drives over a hazard tile that turns out to be a pit trap, they roll the shooting die. As long as the result does not match the size of the vehicle has safely driven across the pit trap, which then becomes an impassable obstacle space. It's been quite a trip, but now you know how to use and set up all of the available expansion content for Thunder Road Vendetta. I'm Steve Tassi, the board game guy, wishing you happy driving. Oh, hi. I'm here in the Board Game Guy kitchen just whipping up another batch of gaming-related content, so be sure to subscribe to my channel so you're notified when it's uploaded.